on the Data Center Task Force final report and recommendations. And we have several presenters here with us today. We ask that they would turn on their cameras. We have representatives from Park and Planning, and the chair of the planning board is unable to be with us, but he has sent a representative instead. We ask that if you are not a council member and not a panelist, if you would turn your cameras off. But you're welcome to witness the briefing. Thank you so much. Mr. Chair,
Thank
turn it
you.
back to you.
Yes, thank you all very much for joining us. I apologize for the delay. There's a lot going on here in the county. Madam Clerk, there's a message here to please turn on the camera for one of the panelists. All right, well, let me turn it over to, who should I turn it over to here?
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes, sir.
I wanted to let you know, because we don't have a quorum, this briefing is for informational purposes only. That needs to be said.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate the tip. This briefing is for informational purposes only. Who should I turn it over to for the briefing? I see there's a number of panelists here.
I believe Mr. Jones is going to start it off. He can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
Mr.
correct.
Jones, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Olson and members of the Prince George's County Council. My name is Anthony Jones, and I was the co-chair of the Qualified Data Centers Task Force, and I also serve as the acting county attorney. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to brief the council today about the task force recommendations. And I would first like to start by thanking all of the people that made the task force report and recommendations possible. And I want to just recognize the 18 members of the Qualified Data Centers Task Force. The task force was made up of a talented group of subject matter experts and concerned citizens from diverse backgrounds. We had representatives from workers that build and work in data centers throughout the region. We had environmental organization representatives. We had data center developers. We had community organization representatives. So it was a great group of people who all made important contributions to the quality of the report and recommendations. And I just wanted to say everyone contributed. This wasn't a task force where some members did work and others did nothing, but in this group, everyone made positive contributions, which strengthened the overall results of the task force report and recommendations. I understand that Preston Ross, who works for Member Burrows, put together the members of the task force. So I want to thank Preston for putting together a really strong and talented group of people. I want to thank the Prince George's County Planning Department, and I want to recognize the efforts made by the Planning Department, who served as the professional staff for the task force. Throughout the process, Planning Department staff demonstrated the highest level of professionalism and organizational skills. Even when some of our public meetings became rowdy and contentious, the Planning Department staff maintained their professionalism and ensured that our meetings were as productive as possible. I want to especially thank Vanessa Akins and James Hunt for their leadership. They kept us on track and gave us all of the relevant information and assistance we needed to complete our assignment. The task force report and recommendations would not have been possible without the work of the Planning Department team. And I also want to thank the Gensler consulting team. I want to recognize the consultants from Gensler who provided critical technical expertise that enabled us to complete our mandate. So I have a PowerPoint, and I will attempt to share the slides with everyone. But it's saying I can't. It's saying that I can't share the screen. But I'll just say my presentation without putting it on the screen.
It's we're sharing on your behalf.
Okay. Yeah, mine is separate from that, so I'll just go ahead with my presentation. So transparency was a key aspect. It was a key goal of the Qualified Data Centers Task Force. All of our meetings were open to the public. They were live streamed, and all of the information was put on our website, which included meeting minutes, upcoming meeting notices. We sought to create a transparent as process as possible, and I believe that we created one of the most transparent processes in the history of Prince George's County. We had 4 community meetings throughout the process. 3 were held in July, and we had another meeting in November. Over 600 members of the community participated in our public meeting about data centers. We received thousands of written comments from the public, which informed the task force reports and recommendations. And I just want to recognize Councilmember Legay for her leadership. After we had the first 3 meetings in July, a total of about 150 people participated in those July meetings. And in my conversations with Councilmember Legay, she said that wasn't good enough. And she was adamant about holding another community meeting. Given the importance of this issue, she advocated for another community meeting. And Chair Oriata was supportive of that meeting, and so was Councilmember Burrows, as well as other members of the task force. So we held a final meeting where over 450 members came out and voiced their concerns about data centers. Our goal was to create a fair and credible process. And so the credibility came from the makeup of the task force. We had, again, a diverse group of backgrounds. We had environmental, labor, and community organizations were represented. We had representatives from power and water companies. We had data center developers, planning and zoning experts, academics, everyone who had the relevant subject matter expertise to contribute to a well-reasoned and well-informed report. We also met with government officials that have a history of dealing with data centers, and we met with officials from Frederick County, Maryland, and Loudoun County, Virginia. So the bottom line for all of this is that even if Prince George's County banned data centers, even if the state of Maryland banned data centers, electricity rates for all Maryland ratepayers would continue to increase if there was a complete ban by the county and the state. And that's because we are part of a larger electrical network, which is the PJM electrical grid network that runs up and down the East Coast of the United States. So even if they were banned in the county and the state, Prince George's County and Maryland ratepayers would still experience increases based on data centers being built in other parts of the PJM network. And so we concluded that the county should benefit from data centers because even if we banned them, we would still bear the burdens of data centers in terms of increased electricity rates without reaping any of the benefits. So I'll just talk about some of the key takeaways, and I will let the other presenters talk about the specific recommendations. But it was clear from all of our community meetings that nobody wants to live near a data center. Given the environmental and other impacts, the public demands input into where data centers are located and other requirements for bringing data centers to Prince George's County. Data centers should be held to high energy efficiency standards, and data centers that locate in the county should also provide community benefits to the county. So that's my presentation. The other presenters will go into greater detail about the specific recommendations, but I stand available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for that and for serving on this task force. Next, I believe I'm going in order. If I'm going in order here, you said Chair Barnes could not be here. So next I have James Hunt. Is James Hunt here?
Good afternoon. This is Paula Davis. I'm here for Chair Barnes.
Oh, okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I apologize.
That's
Ms.
okay.
Davis, you have the floor. You're speaking for Chairman
Yes.
Jared Barnes.
Thank you.
Planning Commission. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Olson and members of the County Council. For the record, I am Paula Davis, Chief of Staff to Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Chairman Darrell Barnes. Due to a previously scheduled engagement, Chairman Barnes and Director James Hunt are unable to join us for this meeting. Both the chairman and the director send their regrets, but we have representation for both. On behalf of Chairman Barnes, it is my honor to greet you and highlight efforts of the team at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. From May to November 2025, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County Planning Department, worked diligently and professionally to coordinate 7 task force meetings with supporting documents which were available to the public. They were in person, via live stream, and via archive video. We planned and executed 4 community meetings covering the northern, central, and southern regions of Prince George's County, which attracted more than 600 participants. We organized 2 data center tours for the task force to Loudoun County, as Mr. Jones have shared, Loudoun County, Virginia, and Frederick County, Maryland. We addressed countless phone calls and email inquiries from the community, media, and other interested parties. We produced and published a 400+ page report that was delivered to the County Council and Task Force on November 24th, 2025, as required by CR-016-25. The report was also released online for the public to view that same day. We also created the presentation that you will review today. The collaborative efforts extended beyond the planning department as leadership, management, and the staff across the Department of Parks and Recreation, Maryland National Capital Park Police, Prince George's County Division assisted with scheduling and logistics for the 4 community meetings. The staff also maintained communication and collaborations with members of the County Council, Qualified Data Center Task Force members, the consultant team at Gensler, and the community. We are proud of the commitment to excellence distributed by the Commission staff during every stage of this process. It truly reflects our 2026 theme at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County, people first and purpose always. At this time, the collaborative effort, at this time, I will now introduce Ms. Vanessa Atkins, Special Project Management Coordinator with the Prince George's County Planning Department, who served as the project manager for the Prince George's County Qualified Data Center Task Force. Ms. Atkins?
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Just before you come on, could I just make sure that anyone who's not presenting, please mute? There was an interruption, so if we could please mute if you're not a presenter. Thank you, Ms. Atkins.
And sorry, one
Unfortunately,
more
I'm not able to.
interruption. Council Member Orietta here, just letting you guys know I have joined. Thank you, Councilmember Olson, for assisting me
Of course.
with
Glad you're
getting
here.
started.
You are chairing the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, my camera has been made inoperable by the host, and I'm unable to turn on my camera. But good afternoon.
I'm just going to make a note if our clerk's office or our tech team can ensure that each of our speakers are able to turn on their cameras. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Oriata and Vice Chair Olson, and members of the County Council. My name is Vanessa Akins, and I am a Special Project Management Coordinator in the Prince George's County Planning Department. And on behalf of Acting Director James Hunt, we are here to brief you on the Qualified Data Center report. Here with me this afternoon is Heather Erweiler of the Planning Department and the consultant team of Gensler, all who have been instrumental in the development of the report. You have heard about the process and work that went into this initiative. Therefore, in the interest of time, I will turn it over to the Gensler team to conduct the briefing, followed by Heather Erweiler. Thank you for this opportunity to brief you.
Thank you.
Gensler?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction. We'll dive into the slides that are up on the screen. Some of it you've heard a little of the components, but we can flip to the first slide. Just to introduce myself and the team. Elaine Asal with Gensler. I'm a strategy director in our Baltimore office, working with Evan Totes, who you'll hear from shortly, and Hajar Boker. both leading this effort. So one of the things that when we launched this project, 3 of our key goals were to really understand what were current perceptions around data centers, what were the key community concerns to address. Some of the things that we heard were around increased energy demand, environmental impacts, and quality of life, and really try to understand what are the economic opportunities that people wanted to see relative to these data center developments. So really understanding what are those kind of community benefits that people wanted to explore. So those are the 3 key tenets that we looked at when we were developing this process and approach. Next slide. The overall, what we'll go through in this briefing will be, again, the high-level executive summary. We'll do a task force overview. There's a community engagement summary, the case study comparison, policy recommendations, and then extensive appendices. So when you see the overall report, all of those components are reflected. Again, the appendix is pretty extensive. In this briefing, we'll keep it all relatively high level, but wanted to walk you through some of the key points. So for the first section, why is this important now? What are some of the things that are critical in terms of across the country? We're seeing data centers being under incredible scrutiny for land use and impact and energy strain. We know that the research is limited in terms of environmental impacts. So wanting to understand, what can we add to that conversation here? What are the community questions relative to the benefit versus cost analysis? So trying to help us better understand some of those things, and then looking at what are others doing that we can learn from across the country. So some of our recommendations are really rooted in those learnings from the case studies. We did a little bit of a task force overview in the previous speakers, but this offers a little bit more context in terms of who participated. If you go to the next slide. So we have some of our members and the engagement that was described in some of our previous speakers in terms of the meetings that were held, some of the things that we did. We did visits to other counties. There were several speakers that came. All of these meetings were recorded and shared online. There's a lot of really incredible information and reports that were all part of this task force engagement. And they were very involved in the final delivery of the report and provided their comment and feedback on the final document. As mentioned, these are some of the key summaries in terms of the speakers that presented. Again, we heard from folks like WSSC, PJM. We heard from other counties like Frederick County. We heard from folks like Exelon. So there was a wide range of speakers that came to speak and provide their input, their perspective. There were a range of different perspectives that were shared, and then opportunities for question and answer with each of those speakers. And again, all of those notes and materials and the presentations themselves are all available online. In terms of the community engagement, as was mentioned, we were able to hold 4 different sessions. If you go to the next slide. So 3 were held in July, the North County, Central County, and South County, different locations. We had, again, a range of 37 attendees the first, 69 attendees for Central County, 44 for South County. And then out of those, there was a desire for an additional meeting in October, which we held in October, on October 25th, with approximately 465 attendees. That was a pretty significant meeting. And so all of this, again, the summaries and the information out of these meetings is all part of the report in pretty great detail. Our approach to each of these meetings, and we kept it the same for all 4 pretty consistently. So the ask was, there was some initial kind of registration. We had some information in the room so people could walk in. We had a welcome message, and we did a brief data center overview. Again, that presentation is on the website as well for reference, and I believe it's in the appendix of the report. And then we really wanted to get into roundtables. We felt like there's so much information and so much detail in each of these topics. We wanted to focus on kind of or smaller conversations. So roundtables that helped us really have conversations with residents, answer their questions, and get to some of the detail and opportunities that folks were interested in. So The roundtable format was what we used. We did 3 different rounds of these smaller tables. So tables would be like 8 to 10 people, and there was a facilitator at each of those tables with a large sheet. They were able to see what the conversations were in the previous rounds, so they're able to build. In terms of the categories for each of those roundtables, one was around common concerns and mitigation strategies. So that was covering the concerns around environmental impact, noise, energy use, water consumptions, potential costs. We had a section around community benefits. So what are the ways that they could add value? How might they support workforce development, tax revenue partnerships, infrastructure improvements? And then third, what are specific, site considerations and design needs? So that could cover things like site access and locations, architectural design, or sustainability strategies. So again, smaller table discussions, 8 to 10 people talking with a facilitator about each of these topics. Hadar, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thank you. So as Elaine mentioned, in these roundtables, participants were able to voice their concerns or ideas, and either the facilitator or participants themselves wrote those comments down either on sticky notes or directly on the poster. We also got a lot of comments after the sessions through email. And then during the October meeting, the meeting then turned to an open mic session, and all of those comments were also transcribed and recorded and included in our data set. Each comment was then digitized and then organized into themes that I will review next. So once we combined the feedback from all 4 meetings, we ended up with over 2,500 individual responses. And from that, 6 major priorities rose to the top. The first was environmental impact. That was clearly the biggest concern across all 4 meetings. Residents consistently questioned whether water usage, emissions, and long-term environmental footprint. Second was governance and planning. That really talked about transparency and residents being included in the process. Economic value came up of data centers, specifically whether benefits like jobs or tax revenue would truly reach Prince George's County residents. Zoning rules and meaningful protections that prevent data centers from being located too close to neighborhoods or community assets. We also heard comments about design and aesthetics, including requests for more robust buffers, better noise control, and facilities that fit visually within the community. And then finally, residents really want there to be community reinvestment from these data centers, investments in parks, libraries, schools, and green spaces. Next slide. This slide breaks down the 2 largest categories, so environmental impacts and then the governance and transparency. In the July meetings, people were focused on energy use and emissions, but in the October meetings, the focus turned more towards water quality and water discharge. Residents also raised questions about long-term impacts on local waterways and ecosystems. And then on the governance side of things, the October meeting made clear that skepticism was increasing in the county regarding data centers, and many participants expressed frustration about how data center decisions have been made and asked for stronger oversight, clearer communication, and genuine opportunities to weigh in before any development moves forward. We also heard a resounding sentiment that residents do not want any data centers in the county, and that's that long orange line from the October meeting. Next. And then the economic side of the discussion, utility rates were the most consistent concern across the meetings. People worried that these major energy consuming facilities would drive up their personal household costs. And then we also saw a shift from the July meeting to the October meetings, where in the October meetings, residents were pushing harder on the question of job creation, especially whether jobs created by data centers would stay local and benefit Prince George's County residents directly. Regarding zoning, there was widespread concern about putting data centers near residential communities. We got a lot of ideas about better suited alternative uses like recreation, mixed-use development, or community serving facilities instead of data centers. Next slide. And then finally, this slide talks about comments related to design, noise, and broader community needs. If data centers were to be approved in the county, residents would want them to meet high standards for sustainability and design, and that includes stronger setbacks, improved screening, and meaningful controls on noise and light pollution. We heard a good number of comments about noise, especially around 24/7 operations and generator noise. And we also heard that any new development should contribute directly to the community. So people emphasize the need for educational investments, such as technical training programs, STEM programs, support for local schools and libraries. But what was really clear about the community benefits section was that residents want development that enhances their community, and they want developers to bear that cost of those improvements. As I mentioned previously, the report goes through these findings more in depth and includes every comment we received throughout the entire process in the appendix. And you can read our further detailed findings in the report. Handing it off to Evan.
Awesome. Thanks, Adar. Thanks, everyone. So to close us out here, I want to take a little bit of time to talk through the other sort of portion of our research and really kind of the underpinnings of how we got to some of our recommendations. What we did was did a close case study comparison between different policies, really contrasting what exists currently today in Prince George's County versus other municipalities and jurisdictions across the US that are also seeing data center development. So on the next slide, you'll see kind of where the current regulations stand in Prince George's County. I think it's important to note that we're not really trying to create a set of regulations from scratch. There are absolutely regulations in place, and many of those regulations are already aligned or very near kind of what we'd consider best practices. And so we weren't really trying to rewrite the zoning ordinance, but really just to find those gaps and address the community concerns that we heard through our engagement sessions. In addition to that, we've got the temporary moratorium on new data center development, which was issued kind of late summer, early fall this year. So I think this is a timely report, obviously, to kind of focus in on some of the additional regulations or policies that you may want to put in place. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the 5 different case studies that we looked at were actually located kind of around the US. We took several from kind of adjacent jurisdictions, so Loudoun County, Fairfax County, as well as Frederick County. These were essentially places that have undergone similar types of intensive data center development or kind of positioning themselves to receive additional growth. Loudoun County is really considered that sort of pioneer within the data center world. It hosts a large portion of that data center infrastructure within the nation, and so they've kind of gone through their own process and updated some of their codes accordingly in recent years. Fairfax County, similarly to Loudoun, is also beginning to experience some of that pressure, and they're pulling together a lot of different jurisdictions, best practices to pull together their own policies there. Frederick County, similarly to in the Maryland side of the border there, is also recently done their own studies and updated their zoning code. And then we have 2 other sort of similar but geographically distinct areas. One sort of Greater Atlanta, which has taken a much more aggressive approach to regulating data center development within the actual footprint of Atlanta, and a sort of contrasting view in Franklin County in Ohio, which is taking a much more incentivized approach to attracting data center development. So with that, we can kind of go to the next slide here, which compares a bunch of different things. I promise I will not go through all of these at once, but I do want to highlight a couple distinct factors that each of these counties kind of use to inform our overall recommendations. So the first, Loudoun County, under their current ordinance, they've really moved towards a special use exception. Essentially, any project that's coming through as a data center is going to be reviewed and go through not only an administrative but a legislative process, which means there will be public hearings, there's opportunities to comment. It's much slower, it's much more sort of checks and balances in that process. And so that kind of became the gold standard when a place that was sort of traditionally known as a very laissez-faire environment for data center development kind of took that step to slow down the process and open up a lot more space for public engagement and more iterative design on those types of projects. Frederick County across in Maryland took a slightly different approach and really created a concentration of where these data center developers could effectively locate and made that process within that district or within that boundary a little bit more streamlined. So they created their own overlay zone, allowing growth within that boundary. And that really prioritized the reuse of industrial lands and the preservation of agricultural lands in the county, trying to balance those different competing land use needs while also allowing for some opportunities for economic development. Within Fulton County, which would be Greater Atlanta, there are really strong local regulations related to where projects can be located. So particular interest, any high capacity transit systems near their sort of Beltline Greenway system for recreation, as well as identified commercial corridors. And in addition to going through the special use exception, they are considering the submission of additional studies and disclosure for plans for energy and water use, stormwater management, tree impacts, and utility needs to really give the governing body a full suite of information and projections so they can make informed decisions about development happening within their community. Franklin County, again, is a much more sort of incentivized environment. And so they, similarly to Frederick, created a more sort of concentrated zone whereby to locate data centers. Those were created within a designated business park area. And it's sort of the town employment shed center. And this is essentially treated as a by right office use. And so we will be looking to them as sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, being much more incentivized here. And finally, Fairfax County, which is a place that is really kind of taken the best practices from some of these other places that we've mentioned and crafted their own sort of policies, kind of towing the line between a couple different groups and a couple different jurisdictions to formulate this very sort of nuanced policy that works great for them. Go on to the next. Just very briefly, I want to hit on some of our overall policy recommendations. We won't go into each of these. There are detailed sort of overviews of each of these within the report. They include implementation plans, which identify some of the key next steps, stakeholders, and considerations, which were sort of underpinned to these policy recommendations. On the next slide, you'll see the overall principles, which are a synthesis of the feedback that was received from all of our community engagement sessions, as well as the case study research, which was compiled. And so I think the most important thing for folks on the council is really these 6 principles are what we're trying to aspire towards. And I think we've made some preliminary recommendations on ways that we think you can meaningfully enact policy changes in pursuit of these principles, but it's very much a menu of options and a starting point for discussion where I think next steps for you all are really deciding what's best for the community and which does sort of address these guiding principles most effectively. So these include promoting compatible and sensitive land use, protecting the environment, maintaining community character, ensuring a transparent and inclusive planning process, maximizing local economic benefits, and investing in local social infrastructure. So on the next slide, we've sort of distilled down where each of these recommendations fall in relation to the goals. There's certainly crossover between them and they're not mutually exclusive. But the intent is really that we have at least a couple under each that really try to advance one of these as clearly as possible. So, for sensitive and compatible land use, Hadar spoke a lot about trying to protect environmentally sensitive areas, sort of concentrating data centers in certain areas so that they're not infringing on, either already developed communities or potential areas for growth of residential development, protecting the environment through sustainability, articulating operations plans, articulating needs for use of high efficiency, lower energy use, lower water use facilities, maintaining community character, really trying to be more sensitive on the actual design aspects of data centers, ensuring that there's appropriate screening and appropriate noise attenuation to make sure that there are no sort of no externalities, no negative impacts to the surrounding communities. Ensuring a transparent and inclusive process is really making sure that there is a space for people to comment. I think there's been projects in the past where folks have been felt outside of the process, unable to sort of stop or provide input. And so really trying to create spaces and create opportunities for people to meaningfully engage in the process as a very quickly moving and a very quickly evolving sort of land use and policy environment for data centers. And then finally, maximizing economic benefits and investing in social infrastructure, really trying to ensure that community is centered in the discussions and the actual decision making related to data center development, and ensuring that we can immediately sort of track back these different inputs into meaningful benefits and meaningful impact within the local communities of Prince George's County. So with that, I know we started a little bit late. We can go to the next slide. I'm happy to pass it over to Heather to kind of talk through maybe some prescribed next steps and kind of do an overview. I saw a lot of things popping up in the chat, so if there are questions specific to the presentation or things that we can follow up on, we're happy to hang on to answer those. And if there are any other questions from the council, we're happy to receive those as well. So thanks all for your time. And thank you to Co-Chair Jones for the intro. All your support during this has been amazing. The planning staff is incredible and made nothing short of a series of miracles to get this massive undertaking executed in such a short amount of time. So thanks to all for your time today and for all your questions and interest in this topic.
Thank you, Evan. My name is, good afternoon, Chair Arriata and County Council members. My name is Heather Erwiller. I'm also a Special Program Management Coordinator along with Vanessa. I've been supporting this effort. And on behalf of Acting Planning Director James Hunt, I just wanted to kind of close this up. So in next steps, we're kind of already in that time of next steps. We've already been receiving information from various folks asking questions related to what the next steps are with legislation. And so as we go through that, next slide, what we really wanted to just talk about, next slide, sorry, that's just the appendices. We really want to talk about is like the variability in data centers, size and how they appear on the landscape. All of that is subject to the council's desire to regulate. So you determine what those facilities are going to look like through your regulations. And so next slide, we kind of just put this information into the backup so that when you're thinking about legislation and the way you want to craft the regulations to protect the community, that you could think about the fact that these facilities are different, right? So like the hyperscalers are the ones that, next slide, that we're really talking about, which is this last slide on the right here. It's just showing what that hyperscale is. Those are the Microsofts, the Amazons, and those large facilities that are the real power generators. But there's everything between a data center that somebody's like using as their call center all the way up to these hyperscalers. So like you as a council, we just wanted to reiterate that you have this opportunity here to really think about holistically how you want to attack these particular data centers, and you want to think about them, whether it's holistically like any data center, or whether you want to understand that there are different needs for data centers based on the way that the data center is actually utilized. In that, we're really looking at the special exception process and the plan development process as the processes that are going to protect the community resources and the concerns that the residents are actually expressing, right? They really want to know what the community benefits are going to be. They want to know what those are going to be, how those are going to fall in the landscape, and they want to know how those are going to impact their individual neighborhoods. Like they want to see what these facilities, if you're going to allow these facilities, what they're going to give those residents, and they want to be able to be part of that discussion. That plan development and that special exception process allows them to be part of that. Where some of these other techniques like overlay districts are a little bit broader and they don't allow for that same participation unless it's on the front end, right? So like individually on a plan development, it's an individual property. So, right, we can talk about all of the externalities for that individual property and all of the impacts that the individual property could have on neighborhoods or on surrounding areas. Same thing with the special exception process. We can do the same thing. We don't have that same physical ability when we're talking about overlay districts. Overlay districts are really broad. They're great when you're looking at contiguous properties and regulating those contiguous properties. They're a little less great when we're talking about diffuse properties in different parts of the county, because the county itself has different subregions that all have different flavors in each of the different neighborhoods. So in closing, we just really wanted to kind of have that final conversation where all of these regulations and all of the policy recommendations here are open for discussion, and we look forward to working with the county council to kind of figure out what's the next step in the legislative process so that we can provide what the support you need on the data center issue. And with that, I want to thank you on behalf of this group and behalf of the director and the chair.
Thank you so much. Opening up the floor to any questions or comments from my colleagues. Please, you can either raise your hand and I can see you on the screen, or you can press the button at the raise hand feature.
Or the community have opportunities for questions?
I'm sorry, I don't know who that
I'm
was.
just wondering, is this just for the council people or the community can answer? There's some questions in the chat. I was wondering if you're going to address those.
I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking. If you're on, I can't see. Donna, can you help me? I apologize.
Madam Chair, there were individuals putting comments in the chat, which I did put a message in just to remind individuals who weren't with us previously during COVID. We do not accept questions and comments in the chat. The chat is just for council members to, request to speak. Any questions or comments would need to be made on the record, like actually a person actually saying it on the record. So I think the gentleman was alluding to that, and we are not set up today for we didn't have a sign-in sheet, for speakers today, since this was just a briefing from the task force to the council members. And I'm not sure if that will be done at a later time, but that's where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. I was not seeing the chat, but just wanted to reiterate for what Donna, our clerk, said. Because I know sometimes people think that the chat might be on record, but because of public meetings and anything that's said has to be tracked. So it's not about not having an opportunity for people to speak, but we just want to make sure that anything that's said is captured on the record. And again, since we're on Zoom, usually in the day, I have the ability to see everyone. So just be mindful that for just coming off mute and speaking is only for the council members or the staff if they would like to get my attention. I personally, being as the chair, am open to having the opportunity for the public to speak at the briefing. So I will create space for that, and we will figure out logistically. My clerk has to let me know how I can do it because, again, everything has to be captured for the record. Any person that's come to the council, they'll know that if you sign up to speak, there's certain information that you have to give. So I'm fine with it and willing to create the process in this moment, but I also want to make sure we're following the law. And so I will, when we get to that space, ask the clerk for guidance. Now I will go to the council members that have their hand up. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Denoga, and then Sydney, I see you, so you'll be in the queue next.
I have either questions or comments about some of the slides. Can the slides be put up?
Could we have the slides put back up, please? Thank you.
Particularly, one that talked about overlay zones and where to locate. Well, while we're waiting for that, just to be clear, when Derek Leon Davis and Mel Franklin put in CB1 2021, I went along with that because we're given such a rosy picture of how great data centers are, free money. And in hindsight, not free money, too many problems. The slides are not moving forward.
Were you looking to the policy?
I think so. You're moving on to keep going.
So I think whoever is steering, it's towards the back in the policy recommendations. Yeah, one more, I think.
Yeah, that was it. You went just past it. Some concerns that I have, Prince George's County has a unique geography, in particular where the industrial zones are. So I think what we've heard from the public, and I agree with the public, is we don't want these near people's communities. Now that takes your residential zones, out of the picture. CB1 allowed development in the RR zone that was recommended to us by the EDC because that's where the most available land was outside the rural area. But if you look at our industrial zones, which brownfields, we're talking about incentivizing brownfields. Has the consultants or park and planning identified where there would be suitable brownfields in the county that could accommodate data centers, particularly large data centers, without having an impact on residential communities? Because I believe that is incredibly limited. So I'd like to know if there's been anything identified, because it's easy to put a bullet. It's a lot, on a slide. It's a lot harder to actually find the locations.
Yeah, that's a great point. The answer to your question for the scope of work, no. It was identified as a next step to actually see from these recommendations kind of what would be a policy priority and do these mapping exercises and kind of follow up with the legwork to kind of true up some of these. This is definitely not a menu of recommendations that would be like completely adopted across the board. Some of these are more restrictive, some of these are less restrictive. So I think to your point around overlay zones.
But this is the key point. If we're going to create an overlay zone, you got to have a place to lay the zone.
Correct.
And I only see two places that you can do it. One is in brownfields and industrial zones, which if you look at where they're located, how narrow they are, and how they're located near residential communities, many of whom are environmental justice communities, that very limited options. Your other alternative is to go to the rural area, which undermines our agricultural community and is not favored there. So you get to the point of, well, then if where are you going to put these overlay zones? And I gather you said it's next step. Well, with my experience looking at the Prince George's County zoning map, I think the next step on that, I think the public needs to be aware, the council needs to be aware that's going to be very difficult, except for maybe small data centers.
Thank you for that.
And I got a couple more, Madam.
You have a
I was
couple.
quiet on retreat. Remember,
Mm,
I'll be quick.
thank
When you say overlay zone, we're not talking about a floating zone. We're talking about an actual, so one that floats and you apply later. You're talking about identifying locations for an overlay zone and then putting them down like Frederick did.
Correct.
Okay. The only other point that I'll make is Heather was talking about special exception process, just to remind the public that special exceptions are a process, but the use is presumed compatible. So you actually have the burden of proof on the public to demonstrate that it's the impacts exist that go above and beyond what one would expect for that use in that type of location. So there's a very high burden to reject a special exception for anything, and for a data center, that's going to be some. It's going to be a difficult burden. So just putting that out there. So that is a process. But so the plan development process, in terms of public engagement and public being heard, that would be a better route. So thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you. And as I mentioned before, that I was definitely open to public comment and wanted to find the best way to do it. I chatted with our clerk, and so the only way for us to do it to make sure we're in compliance is that we'll have to use a sign-in, which we can use the chat to serve in that capacity, but you'll have to put your first, your last, and your address. It's the same information that you would put if you came before the council to speak. So I'm going to go to council members first, and then I will do my best to follow the list the way it comes into the chat, but hopefully everyone can give me grace in that. Next, going to Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
And I'll make my questions within 2 minutes. My questions for Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. When it comes to geographical locations for data centers across the county and where the best use could be, or for the overlay zones, have we looked at the infrastructure envelope to know where the need is for utilities just across the board? Because utility consumption is different all across this county, or so just utility improvements and building that infrastructure is important. And number two, if Heather could please explain, for the public or anyone that's watching, the difference between a planned unit development and a special exception process, and the timelines for that, and how the community engages in that process as well. Just because we're talking in codes here sometimes, but the community might not all the way be following that whole process.
Sure, I can do that. So a plan development is a site-specific rezoning, essentially, that allows you to evaluate the proposed development, whatever that development is. In this case, it would be the data center development on not only the property itself, but the environment around the property, right? So you have to look at compatibility, and you have to look at the design as well of the concept plan of how everything's going to lay out on the site. It just opens up a little bit more ability to evaluate the project versus the overlay, which is a little bit broader. That being said, that's different from a special exception, which, as Councilman Jernoga said, it's that special exception process is a list of or criteria that a property would have a property owner who wants to do a data center has to meet. So you basically have a laundry list in your code of these are the items that have to be included in that special exception. If they can hit all those things, it goes through a different process. That process with the special exception, both of these processes take quite a bit of time. PDs, I've worked on PDs that have taken very significant amount of time. But if it's the issue of looking at properties that either are borderline or aren't in a facility in a particular zoning where we really need to look at the overall impacts on a bigger area, that plan development is going to allow me to do that versus the special exception. It's really going to be looking at, here's the list of criteria. Are you hitting that criteria? If you're not, then the answer is no. You can't have this use at that property. So the timeline's anywhere from 9 months on a plan development or longer. Special exceptions can be done a little bit faster, but nothing moves very fast these days. So there is still some time. You're probably looking at between 4 to 6 months on special exception and that's a conservative estimate. It may be quite a bit longer. It depends on how much information you get on the front end. Right, like you need the front end loaded application to have all of the criteria, and that doesn't always happen.
And Heather, can you answer the question about my first question about the infrastructure and compatibility for geographical locations to where it could be supportive of utility consumption or where we're deficient in that? Is there a map of that?
Not yet, but I think that that's one of those areas that we're going to have to really look at as we're looking at this ramping up what the legislation actually looks like, whether it's land development code regulation or bills or that type of thing. We really need to be looking at where is the utilities available, right? Like, so where they are now, what the plan is, because we don't really control electricity. Like we have a better feel for like water and sewer and where those things are, how roads set up, because there's a little bit more play. We have kind of as a body been left out of electrical lines, right? Like we don't plan for the electrical system. It's just on the landscape. It's something that the developer has to bring in. So that's a very interesting idea, is really like, let's lay down those electrical lines. Let's lay down the areas where the capacity actually is and see what properties pop up, right? Because they may pop up in places that we don't actually want them. So it's a good idea as a tool to like looking at the policy going forward to do something like that. And that's something that I will definitely bring back to the planning director. I'll bring all these comments back to the planning director, but I think that that's a really good idea, because that's where the rubber hits the road right here. These facilities are energy hogs, right? So like if they're in an area where they're going to impact other places because they're sucking up all the energy, that's a problem. So thank you for that.
And lastly, Madam Chair, just a point of reference. Not everyone's on water and sewer. In the South, in the rural area, we're on well and septic. So water reservoirs come into play as well. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councilmember Harrison. Next, Councilmember Sheila Adams Stafford.
Thank you
And
so much.
Councilmember Ricky.
He won't go to sleep. All the lights are out. It's dark. He still doesn't care. He wants to be a part of this discussion. So, I thank you so much for this briefing. And as you know, and my community knows, I have been an adamant voice about the need for a pause and for us to really ensure that these data centers are not in residential areas because of some of the challenges that are presented in terms of utility usage. And I am wondering if, from the policy perspective, you can share with us what's being done in other states to pass the cost burden of data center usage on to the companies. I know that there was some legislation, I believe, introduced in New Jersey that does that. And then I also have heard in other places where, I believe in Georgia, where residents are not required to pay more in utilities at all. As a matter of fact, in some of the community benefit agreements, I'm envisioning that data centers should assume any increase for any residents in a region that could possibly be impacted. Additionally, I'm wanting to know more about just the health impacts of data centers, the public health impacts.
I know that many members of my community have reached out because they have seen in other areas in the country large, emissions that have come from some of the hyperscale data centers that can be cancerous, that can be toxic, that can be, terrible for our environment as well. And so I'd like to know if you could someone could speak to some of the public health impacts. And then just lastly, I think that, it's just important for me to understand just the scale of what we currently have in the county, and based on that graphic, like what we currently have, just for my own understanding. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, council member. So just to recap here, question one focused more on how we've seen models of passing costs back on to developers or utility providers to not impact local residents. Question two, more focused around environmental public health impacts of data center development. Cool. Okay. So on the first
Sorry, I
question,
just want you not to forget her last question is understanding the composition of what we also currently have.
got it.
Thanks.
So the first question, the example that's coming to mind to me immediately is the Georgia Public Service Commission's recent legislation, which forces data center developers to offset the costs of extending infrastructure and infrastructure upgrades associated with hyperscaler data center development. So a lot of those are being driven kind of from the utility provider level, and it's kind of going up the chain to them and back down again. So the context is not apples to apples necessarily between Maryland and Georgia, which have, vastly different policy environments. But I think a lot of the municipalities in Georgia were feeling like they wanted to be more restrictive on their data center development. And the state incentives were actually vetoed, or there was a vote to end the state incentives, which was vetoed by the governor. So there's a lot of tension in Georgia there. So this was almost a concession by the Public Service Commission to kind of hopefully offset some of those associated costs and deter data center development. We didn't get into a ton of, admittedly, like finding policy avenues to offset those costs as it relates to like utility provision. I think what we did do in terms of the policy recommendations is we made no recommendations whatsoever to like offer tax incentives or to offer special, conditions that would incentivize developers to come. I think if anything, we created an environment whereby we were almost codifying the need to pursue community benefits agreements, the need to codify kind of sharing out what their anticipated like energy usage and water usage plans would be, just to provide some of that transparency where those environments necessarily weren't always the case for developments prior. Question number two around public health impacts and environmental. Right now, the reality of the situation is that this is a really rapidly advancing land use, and it has historically been very hidden, kind of behind the scenes, not transparent whatsoever. And so we really don't know what we don't know. We did find a lot of municipalities, even within the last year, that have sort of begun to force developers to disclose the types of anticipated, noise, water usage, potential adverse environmental impacts, sustainability, air monitoring, etc. So we'll begin to start receiving some of that data when those projects are kind of built out and begin to build those databases. But to the date, we don't have a lot of really sound sort of resources. We have, some kind of secondary projections and estimates, but not a lot of not a lot of really good publicly available data. A lot of white papers kind of talking to the issues that you're speaking to, council member, but that was just a limitation of the study, kind of based on the lack of data, but definitely something that we're personally concerned about and want to make sure that we're creating policy mechanisms that can hopefully help to make more informed decisions in the future. And then for the composition of the data centers, which already exists within the county, by way and large, these are mostly sort of enterprise data centers that are centered around existing institutional uses. So, University of Maryland, large health systems, Department of Defense, Homeland Security, kind of these more focused, smaller scale facilities, which are serving a particular, sort of like a power user, and not really the types of hyperscaler data center development that you would be seeing in Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, Fairfax, et cetera. There are also smaller data centers, which are more focused on kind of local connectivity, which are much less severe. I think most of the folks on the call here probably are not terribly concerned about those. Those are 5 to 10,000 square feet, usually integrated within an existing building, and are really more about sort of dispatching and moving internet traffic from larger facilities to smaller facilities. So that's kind of a broad, overarching statement, but that's kind of the overall picture of things. So hopefully that's helpful. If there's additional clarifications, I'm happy to provide them.
Thank you. I have a few questions before I move to public either comments or questions. One thing I am curious of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I could have missed it when in the report. But and I know we were looking at case studies and analysis, and I get usually you want to look at places that have done it to see how they've done it. But in this case, I'm also interested in places that have made the decision not to do it and why they've made those decisions, and also looking at the parallels between those communities and ours. So just curious of, was there any deep dive or conversation or analysis in those communities that have decided to ban or have a current moratorium?
The question you're asking, just to clarify, you're asking about, have we looked at counties that have effectively banned data centers outright?
Right, or because they had them and then moved to moratorium, which are some jurisdictions, right? That they might have some scale data centers, but now have made a decision to not build any more. So I saw the case studies that you had. I'm just curious if the only focus was on those that just have them, or were there also analysis on those that had and then made a decision to implement a moratorium,
Sure.
and why, or those that just evaluated and decided not to do it, and those reasons why?
Yeah, so in terms of moratoriums, I mean, from a land use, I'm not a land use attorney, so I don't want to totally put my foot in my mouth here, but I think, moratoriums are a tool to slow a process and to readjust your land use policies to more accurately reflect kind of the challenges you're facing within a given jurisdiction, right? So it's not a permanent hold, and the outright banning of a land use is, I would say legally murky at best. And so I think the way that jurisdictions are getting around this are creating extremely burdensome and onerous policies to discourage their development. So I think Atlanta is a great case of, a very laissez-faire state government, which is incentivizing data center development. Fulton County is absorbing a lot of the brunt of this. It's affecting communities of color and under-resourced communities. And so they effectively created geographic limitations, procedural limitations, and transparency hurdles, obstacles for them to provide lots of different types of information to basically really discourage use. And that has curtailed their development significantly without sort of entering into a sort of land use like legal litigation framework whereby they're going to be susceptible to lawsuits from, developers who are, claiming undue takings or inability to build projects in their jurisdiction. So I think we've tried to pick what we find to be some of the more progressive policies and areas where we've been seeing pressure for data center development, but not necessarily like wholesale, kind of like we've lost the cause, or places that are on the contrary, like super like build, build, build. So we've tried to find you know a balance between those. But I think what the recommendations that we've included really attempt to do are uphold what we heard from the community, which is definitely um, not a desire to see more data centers. I think that the policy recommendations that we've offered are reasonable best practices that will overall discourage and slow the sort of demand for data centers within the county. And I think it's up to the council to really determine kind of what those policy priorities are and how discouraging or incentivize they want to bring data center like future data center development to the county.
Thank you, and I appreciate that analysis now, because and I could have missed it, and I again could go back and read the report. But I think one of the issues I heard from some of the residents that read the report is that it seemed to lean towards a foregone conclusion, right, of wanting data centers and figuring out the best way to do it versus a analysis fairly from all sides. If you want it, if you don't, if it works, if it won't, what kind of communities are moving forward with it, what communities are stopping it. And so that's just something to note for you all from a perspective of this is what you do. Um, I think it would have been better for me to see all of those things represented because you're saying that you heard such a staunch opposition, but I don't see it reflected in the recommendations or the case studies or the analysis that you've done. So that
Correct.
was just disappointing to me. I'm only one opinion, one voice on the council. I've been very clear that I don't support the data centers, but I think that the report's job was to have all perspectives fairly there from an objective perspective for everyone to be able to review. And I just don't know if what you all presented here does that.
Sure.
The
So,
next thing,
Councilwoman, I would
I
say
just want to move on to
there's
another question though,
there
because I
is
want to be mindful.
actually
I
not
want
like a
to move.
legitimate
Can
land
you,
use.
excuse me?
There's not a
Can you hear me?
legitimate.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Oh, you can? Okay. So just so you know, as a reference point, same for the committee. If I'm speaking, you don't interrupt me. And so I'm moving on to another question, but I do thank you. Another point that I think I like to understand kind of goes back to Shayla's question when we're looking at the recommendations and trying to understand what, I guess, other jurisdictions are doing to mitigate what we feel or what we know are kind of like the biggest hurdles, right? When they are implementing um, data centers, cost being probably the biggest one, right? We know right now that utility costs are astronomical. And the reality is that there's a lot of factors there, but one main factor is also the infrastructure. And so circling back to what she said, I know if the report, and if you can point me to a page in the report, are those recommendations or the things that Shayla mentioned, are any of those noted here as policy recommendations to do in the actual report?
Specifically to The
specifically to cost mitigation or solutions around either spreading the cost or holding the companies responsible for paying their fair share. Just pointing me to where that is in the report.
There are not specifically related to utility cost offsetting.
Okay.
Um,
And I thank you for that. And I'll just reiterate, I think again, that's an example of what I see here noted in the report is a space where that you talk about costs, like that the cost of it is a huge factor and the cost of it is an issue that was brought up by residents. But it's disingenuous to me to see a report that doesn't reflect any recommendations that are tied to that exact issue that was brought up. And so, again, this is the report that we have in front of us, but I wish that those recommendations, now myself and Councilmember, say Adam Stafford, and some of us might know these, and Councilmember Gay, some of these recommendations ourselves because of the work we've done offline in our positionality on this. But some of our colleagues are looking to this report for a full spectrum. And I think that the recommendations focusing on implementation around zoning is, not the only thing I would have loved to see. But I want to create space to make sure that I hear from the residents. I'll take one more comment from my colleague, and then we'll move to the chat. So Vice Chair Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask a few things. The backup generators. I understand that those are largely diesel, and I know that my understanding and what I've been briefed on from others is that that puts soot and particulate matter out into the atmosphere, and they have to be tested or not tested, but well, I guess tested, run every week or regularly anyway. And we are a community with asthma, and we have a lot of environmental problems that we have to deal with and health impacts. Can you talk about what what other jurisdictions are doing with that? Or I mean, a lot of them are not doing anything with that, or alternatives to diesel, backup generators. I mean, that just seems like going many, many, many steps backwards when we're trying to clear our air regionally.
Yep. Thanks for that. So in terms of environmental regulations, I do want to go back to some of the specific policy recommendations. While we didn't have a cost breakdown or like offset, we did have policy recommendation number, policy number recommendation number 6 was related to surcharge for high energy users such as data centers. So that's really, from a land use perspective, the county doesn't have jurisdiction to necessarily control utility planning or provision, but it would be able to provide a surcharge on data centers to again sort of disincentivize some of that. So I just wanted to circle back on that first. Apologies. On the second piece that you're speaking to related to backup generators, there are some jurisdictions which are beginning to implement sustainable operations plans. These would effectively say that there is some policy and procedure in place to monitor emissions for a given generator. A lot of the generator legislation that we have seen is more related to noise than it is to actual environmental performance. But there are other policies which are providing more specific standards for like the level of generator that's being used. So like how clean it burns. I know that that's like, I totally hear what you're saying about environmentally like stepping 10 feet backwards using these generators, but it is something that you can meaningfully control to reduce those emissions. But we haven't seen alternative energy uses at a meaningful level for any emergency backup power generation.
So so what you're saying is basically there's not any clean way of having backup.
Yeah,
Just
I would say I have not come across any cases. There might be for smaller data centers, but from a hyperscaler where there's
yeah.
a tremendous amount of energy capacity, I have not seen that in any of my research.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a big problem that we're all going to face. I have a lot of other questions, Madam Chair, but I know our time is short, and we have a lot of people to get to. But I do have a lot of significant concerns, as I'm sure we all do, and we will be continuing to hear more from the community and try to work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Olson and my colleagues, because obviously this will be probably before us again, right? If any piece of legislation comes from the recommendations, I know myself and Councilmember Blagay will be putting a repeal in for the legislation that took the council out. So I do know that will at least be before us, but I want to make sure we create the space for the community. So I will start. I'm just going to scroll back. So I have the first one, Belinda Queen. So we're going to put 2 minutes up, and we're going to ask you to come off of mute and come on screen if possible. All righty.
Because it said host has your video disabled. Good second.
Okay. We'll try to get your video on, but we can hear you.
Okay.
So
real quick, let me just go real quick. And greetings to all. Thank you all for your dedication to this study on behalf of the residents of Prince George's County. The Central Coalition of Prince George's County has sent in several letters for the record stating that several times that we are not for data centers. Everything seems to always get jumped in Central Prince George's County. The residents is frustrated and tired of the high taxes, the high utility bills, food bills, even the cost for us to get our taxes and tags and registrations and titles and mission. People are just fed up. We would ask that we would investigate having a temporary moratorium on data centers. We need to get the cost of living in Prince George's County in place before we think about bringing data centers and any other things that will impact our health and cause higher costs. Thank you to our council members who are standing up and speaking out. We hear you on behalf of the residents. We also see you. Thank you, Councilmember Shayla, for even wanting to pass the costs on to developers. But you know how we tried to do that with the school system, and they always find a way around legislation that not pay what they need to pay. Businesses are not, and developers does not seem to have honest integrity. I just want to say, on behalf of the residents, you guys, please keep listening to the people, but know our struggles, know what we're going through, know what the everyday citizen is going through. We need our council members to stand up and make a change. We don't need you guys to unfortunately keep making decisions that will hurt and affect our residents. Prince George's County is losing too many people. We deserve to live here. And also listen to the people who have paved the way and lived here first. So thank you so very much.
thank you so much, Ms. Queen. As always, and with the community. Next I have Greg Smith. Same, if you could come off camera if possible and off of mute.
For some reason, I did not see Mr. Smith anymore. I think we may have lost him for a moment. If we could advance to the next speaker, come back.
I can.
Thank you.
Lavina, Michael Lavina, are you still on? Okay, I'll move on to
Mr. Lavina is on.
Oh, okay.
He's asking if his comment can be read. He has a child and can't come up with it.
Okay, just give me 1 second to scroll back. Let's see. I'll read your question aloud for the record. This question is, how does expected county revenue of data centers, which I don't think I caught in the presentation or the report, compared to other community proposed projects mentioned in the public meeting, like solar farms or the vocational educational facilities. So I will put this to the consultants. Was there an evaluation done on the possible revenue generated compared to other types of projects?
Thanks for the question. We did not run an economic analysis as a part of this scope. We did recommend that the next steps would include working closely with the Economic Development Commission to develop a more comprehensive strategy for Prince George's, looking at that exact question. So hopefully that would be implemented in tandem with some of these mapping exercises, which we're trying to understand, like, what is the potential and what would that actually mean in terms of dollars received for the county if it were to be built.
Thank you. And I think I'll echo the sentiments of the question. It's one that I've asked, and I think Councilmember Fisher, you put a great presentation to Mako at the Mako conference that allowed us to start to dive into this. But I do think that there's a lot of conversation about the revenue, but there's not clarity on what the revenue is or at what scale, because we hear like the best case scenario where there's huge and lots of data centers. But if you're talking about 1 to 2, what does that economic, win actualize into? And so it's important that I think that we're realistic with the numbers, that we present something that's real. We can't look at counties that are light years away in the revenue, because I think it sends a false narrative to our residents about, we'll promise, trust us, let's build this thing and we're going to make this amount of money. And so it's better to see that in a real way so that the elected officials on the call can make a real call on the cost, basically the return on investment of that type of decision. All right, next, Layla. Is it Layla?
Yes, thank you very much. There's so much to bring up. I'm just going to try to make a couple of points. One, in the document, I don't know which page it was, but in the policy recommendations, first and foremost, and I think there are many people on this call that would agree, specific recommendations, a specific column that talks about public health and a specific column that talks about equity and environmental justice are absolutely essential in any list of policy recommendations. Also, when we're looking at the idea of energy and sustainability, I feel that we are always in this place where we feel forced to accept because otherwise people will step away. And instead, I would really like for Prince George's County to lead the way and demand that the power usage effectiveness ratios are to the best, that the diesel generators are not an acceptable option, and really force, and that means not talking about these hyperscale, but really force more focus on battery storage, on renewable energy, on waterless cooling, because many community members will be affected by that. The last thing is nothing should be permitted to go forward without a cumulative air quality impact study. That's essential because we don't breathe isolated air, and we want to make sure that the diesel generators are huge impact to Black carbon, and Black carbon's huge impact to public health, heart cancer and otherwise. So there are a number of other things, but please let's not join a bandwagon for what's more of a timeshare operation where there end up being all these hidden aspects rather than the benefits. And let's just be very responsible about the steps going forward. Thank you so much for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you. And echo your sentiments around understanding the environmental and equity impacts should always be the base of any recommendation that comes before us. Next, Stacy Hartwell.
Hi, thank you. I was just really making a comment. I really was not looking for a response, but if you want, I'll read it. My first comment here is that I served as a member of the PGC task force, and I really feel compelled to clarify that the SAGE report, which was submitted as, I'm just reading it, anyone can read it, but that was submitted as a reference document as part of the final report package, was never reviewed by the task force prior to the vote. And despite this, it was adopted by a so-called majority vote, but there were 2 members who abstained, and I voted against its adoption. My point in sharing this with everyone is that I don't believe that the report was as thorough as it needed to be, that has been echoed throughout the comments from people here today. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, and thank you for serving on the task force. Next, bear with me, I'm scrolling through to make sure I didn't skip a name. Amari Crooms, I believe that's the next name.
That's me. I'm on my partner's computer at the moment. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So first I want to start just by thanking Council Chair Oriata for some honestly really pointed and tough questions. I think folks see that and really appreciate it. Second, I wanted to ask a question. As much talk has been made recently about putting some of these in like rural and agricultural areas. I just wanted to know what, if anything, residents here in these areas, notably South County is a big portion of that, can do to make clear that, you know, their health is as important as anyone else's. Is there a process we might go through to make clear that, like, you know, we deserve the same attention and respect as residents elsewhere? Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm not sure if I'll hold space for if any council member has thoughts, but I will say, one of the things to note is that yes, these are recommendations, but when it comes to any policy change, there'll still be opportunity for public comment. Then we all host listening sessions, town halls. That's also a great time to get more time with the council member than sometimes the 2 minutes that are on these sessions. And we will have a South County stop on the listening tour for districts 7, 8, and 9. And then I see the most southern part of the council, Councilmember Harrison. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Mr. Crooms for joining and commenting and asking a question. Mr. Crooms, as you know, that you've been at 7 or 8 of my public meetings that I've already had over the last 3 or 4 months, and this topic has come up. We're doing everything in our power to strengthen community involvement and participation in the process. I asked a question earlier about plan unit development, special exception process that actually strengthens community participation in that process. So this would allow the community to look at everything as we go through that process. And I know that you'll be there to sign up to speak. So yes, I agree with you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And the last name that I see is Susan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments and also of the other council members. We appreciate looking into this issue. As you know, I was involved with the superconducting magnetic levitation train project, and so there are always so many issues involved. The first comment I want to make is I'm a little concerned by at the beginning comment, something to the effect of because we are already having higher electric rates because of PJM, et cetera. So data centers in the county shouldn't be banned. And that isn't kind of a logical concept to me because in fact, Okay, let's all jump off the bridge. I mean, so should consider. We should consider, even if it's there, then we'd make him higher, or bully's beating me up, we'll let somebody else continue to beat me up. I don't know. Anyway, that struck me as odd. The second thing I wanted to say is to look carefully. It is such a national issue. Every day, not every day, but often in the Washington Post and across the media, there are concerns about what's going on environmentally, et cetera, with the data centers in across the country. And I know in the South especially too, that's been very, very much put out there now that there are problems that have developed. And I just hope we don't go, I don't know if there's an answer to that, but just that we don't go down the route of starting to suffer the problems and then say, oh, oops, now we have to do something about that, because it's too often we end up doing that sort of thing. And thank you very much for listening to my comment, and thank you all for your good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Harrison.
I do have a question though. I think it would be helpful, and I made the point earlier, but I think it would be helpful to all of us as well and the public to know where our strengths are when it comes to infrastructure, where our deficiencies are, where our enhancements are needed, because geographically our county is 499 square miles and it's uniquely different. And so just knowing where those strengths and weaknesses are when we look at utility consumption and where our deficiencies and our inadequacies are, I think that would be very helpful. So when we're mapping out kind of the holistic approach to deciding where these data centers should go, I think that is part of the spoke in the wheel.
Thank you. Very important comment. Any other council member? All right. Any last comments from Anthony Jones, co-chair?
Yes, Ms. Queen had a question about the moratorium, and I just want to announce that on January 23rd, County Executive Brayboy issued an executive order that extends the previous moratorium through April 30th this year to give the council more time to consider comments and to consider legislation on data centers.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, we did get that notice as a council. I want to thank the county executive for staying on top of that and her partnership. I know she worked closely with one of our newest council members, Shayla Adams Stafford, and other council members to move swiftly when what was happening at Landover was brought to the table, and the fact that residents were being blindsided and left out of a conversation that was so important and impacted their community. So kudos to our county executive. And
one final point that I'll make is that electricity costs are a really serious problem, but it's a multi-state problem, because data centers in one part of the network, if they're building data centers in Northern Virginia, that can affect the cost of everyone who's in the network of that. And so it really is a national problem. And so I have been working, as a result of this task force, I've been working with Senator Chris Van Hollen, who introduced legislation on January 15th. It's called the Power for the People Act. And that legislation would require the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to make data centers pay for all of the costs, all of the infrastructure costs for data centers that they're building to supply their companies. The largest driver of electricity rates are the infrastructure costs to connect data centers. So that's extending the power lines, that's building the electrical substations that connect to these hyperscale data centers. That is the largest single driver of electricity rates across the country. And so Senator Van Hollen's legislation, it would require data centers to be responsible for bearing all of the cost, the infrastructure cost of connecting a data center to electrical transmission. The other part of Van Hollen's bill it would give incentives for state public service commissions like the Maryland Public Service Commission or other statewide regulatory bodies. It would incentivize them creating rates in their states that their special use rates that factor in all of a data center's use and demand on the network. So that bill was introduced January 15th, sponsored by Senator Van Hollen. And I think that if that law is enacted, that would really help get a handle on some of the electricity costs associated with data centers.
Thank you for that. And I will note that the council, outside of the conversation with data centers, we mentioned that utilities costs are skyrocketing, some of it because of the impact of data centers in the region and other costs around infrastructure. You know, when we had our retreat, one of the top priorities was asking for a moratorium on increases on utility costs, you know, asking them to consider that at the state level, because that is something that has to be done at the state level. So just echoing that the utility costs is a huge concern. We're seeing people with one individual in the house seeing bills at $300 to $400. Something simple mistake, even with the leak with WSSC, sometimes it can lead to a 10,000 plus water bill. So across the board, we're seeing issues with utility costs, and we are working with our partners at the state level to figure out what we can do. And we definitely don't want to see that compounded by data centers. Is there any other comments from colleagues? Seeing none.
Madam Chair, I just want to ask Mr. Jones a quick question since he's working with Senator Van Hollen.
Perfect.
In order for you probably to kind of get what's driving these energy costs going up, you would need an infrastructure map across the United States as well, and where that is deficient and where the strength is. So anything that you can share with us from the electrical grid that we share with other states would be greatly appreciated, because in certain areas they have 200 data centers, some areas have 0, but the infrastructure cost is a real concern because that's driving people's costs up.
Sure, I can send you a copy of the legislation that was introduced by Senator Van Hollen. And in that legislation, it did have findings of fact about the infrastructure cost being the largest driver of increased electricity rates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, and thank you to the presenters. Thank you to everyone that served on the task force. Thank you for the community that has continuously stayed engaged on this conversation. I genuinely appreciate it. Now I'll move us along in the agenda. We will be going into executive session. So I know we discussed possibly not, but we will be doing that. So I'm going to read that now. I will need a motion to convene an executive session pursuant to section 3-305B1, 7, and 8, General Provision Article Annotated Code of Maryland, in order to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of an appointee, employee, or official over whom it has jurisdiction, and to consider pending or potential litigation, and to consult with counsel to seek legal advice, specifically to discuss the status of personnel of the county council. Can I have
motion for executive session?
Madam Chair, I just texted you some updated language.
Oh,
It's just like an extra line or two.
okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna give it another read, and then I'll take your motion, Councilmember Janogian. I'll just start from the top. Motion to convene an executive session pursuant to section 3-30 5B, 1, 7, and 8, General Provisions, Article Annotated Code of Maryland, in order to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of an appointee, employee, or official over whom it has jurisdiction, and to consider pending or potential litigation, and to consult with counsel to seek legal advice, specifically to discuss correspondence relating to an incident with the incumbent ICO of the county, and to be advised of respective legal ramifications. Do I have a motion?
Motion for executive session, and Mr. Smith finally showed up.
Okay, I'll take a, let's see. Let me finish this out and then we can circle back to his comment.
Yeah.
Okay, so second, you need a second?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you. And Donna, pass it to you.
Chair Oyeda,
Aye.
Mr. Denoga,
Aye.
Ms. Fisher,
Aye.
Ms. Hunter,
Aye.
Ms. Ivy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Olson,
Aye.
Ms. Adams Stafford.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, because we did call your name earlier and you might have had technical difficulties, we'll circle back and this will be our last public comment. You'll have 2 minutes and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. I was prepared to watch you all move on, but thank you, Madam Chair. I got called into another meeting and popped back in. Thanks for this time. I just want to make it clear, we raised our concerns about the composition of the task force membership and the short timeline for the task force and the inadequate scope of work last spring. And very little that happened during this process did anything to address our concerns. And that's unfortunate. You've got some good material in the task force report, but it falls far short of the mark. And our alliance, members of our alliance, about 30 of our organizations, sent the council and the executive a letter asking you to do certain things last week, including a robust public comment session on the data center task force report and recommendations, reimpose the moratorium on environmental permits by county agencies, and extend the current moratorium on consideration of preliminary plan of subdivision until or unless the county has done two things. One, commissioned and completed a robust, transparent, rigorous report on data center impacts with serious recommendations to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those impacts. And the other is enact comprehensive laws that provide protections to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those impacts, and be fully prepared to enforce them. We've got plenty of laws on the books that are good but not enforced. Second was to repeal CB 55/2020, which grants those massive property tax breaks to data center developers. Repeals CB 1/2021, which exempted data centers from CSPs and DSPs and allows them by right in data centers by right in about a dozen zones. Prohibit data center, pass legislation that amends the current zoning ordinance to prohibit data centers as a permitted by right use in any zone in the county. These are the measures that a county serious about data centers impact and serious about protecting public health and environment would take. So thank you very much for digging into this issue. We know that many of you are serious about data center impacts and protecting our communities. Thank you for this additional time. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And you might have missed it, but some of those things have already been in the way. As Anthony Jones mentioned, our county executive already extended the moratorium. Myself and Councilman Begay have already committed to repealing the legislation that cut the council and community out of the process. And then the allowing for public comment today and continuing creating spaces to have the conversation. So just want to reiterate that the leadership of this council and the majority of the members of this council are all about making sure we have community engagement, input, and that we do by the members and our residents. I want to thank Councilmember Burrows for his leadership, knowing that this was such an important topic. And when legislation to just move forward came before him, he said, no, we need to do our due diligence. And so I thank him for making sure that this was something we dived in to and was not something that just was rubber stamped. We had a motion, a second. I will let everyone know we have announced our listening tours across the county. So there will be one in North, Central, and South. If for any reason there's an issue with weather, those listening tours will remain. They will just move to being virtual. So if you follow us on social media or if you're on our listserv, you'll be able to be updated on any changes with that. There's also a countywide survey that is now live that's asking residents for the issues that are important to them. So please take that survey. It's going to help us map our priorities when it comes to legislation, but also the budget that we know will come down in March. I don't have any other announcements in front of me. Council members, please look out for the link for executive session. We won't be coming back to council as a whole, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, just raise your hand. We are officially adjourned. See my council members in a minute. Thank you.